Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us this Thursday evening for the first in what we hope will be a number of sessions called Off the Record. I should put on the record from the outset that next week we won't be with you because there is a film which I highly recommend, which is being shown across London, and you can sign up. It's been emailed out, so I'd highly recommend everyone to see that. But what is Off the Record all about? Well, it's about the idea that there are many stories that we are bombarded with in the news every single week. We spend so much time watching and listening to the news, and it can be rather confusing as to trying to make head or tails as to what exactly are we meant to believe. Where is the fake news? Where is the real news? Well, I want to have my little say once a week for no more than 10 to 15 minutes and maybe look at one particular news story. I have to apologize that we started slightly later than usual. It is a fast day, and we'll come to that a bit later, and therefore I had to change things around. But let's make a start with the first of Off the Record. So what were the stories that have made the news this week? Well, I'm just going to share a few of them. Firstly, there was the story which came from Holland, I believe, about the railways and the offer of compensation for by the railways to the Holocaust survivors and the paltry offer that they have made. That was one story that caught my eye. Now, another story, and I don't want to say I told you so, but I have to tell you, hand on heart, some 4.5 months ago, I saw this story coming. And what was the story? The story was that there was a news report that has come out recently that has warned that the Jewish community is facing no less than five dangerous categories of conspiracy theories aimed at blaming the Jewish people for the outbreak of COVID-19. I remember saying it on Purim. I remember saying it on Pesach. We always have the blood libels, and I said that this COVID, it will end up being the fault of the Jews. And this is what's come out. The Commission for Countering Extremism's CCE has a study into how extremists are exploiting the pandemic. It was published on Thursday with lead commissioner Sarah Khan warning that the impact of extremist propaganda and disinformation to our democracy cannot be overstated. And therefore, there is the accusation of a Jewish plot. Now, that is one story which we saw coming, and therefore I'm not going to deal with it. What I want to deal with today is the story that was in the news in the JC. I believe it may have been circulated in other media, different forms of media, and that is the story about Oliver Anisfield, who started JTV. Now, I read the story the way it is, and then I'll comment on it. That's the way we're going to do it every week. So I'm not putting any twist. I'm going to read the story, and then I'll give you a Jewish angle and my take on it, okay? Take it or leave it. It's off the record. I'll deny it in any case. Okay, so the founder of the Jewish online television station, JTV, has defended himself after his YouTube channel broadcast the controversial interview with David Starkey, in which the historian was forced to apologize for speaking of so many damn blacks. And the nuts and the bolts, because this is a very brief publication or production that we are making every week, just a few minutes of your time to make you think and be a bit provocative. So Ollie Anisfield, who's got this phenomenal channel, you should watch it, JTV, and that is where he has raised awareness about issues about Israel, issues about being Jewish, and he's had some very, very high-profile guests on his show. Not all the high-profile guests make it to his show. He's still got to get me, but I'm joking. But he was accused and criticized by the JC this week for his he has a media company, an activism company called Reasoned UK, which is dedicated to being outspoken for the young conservative activists. And I think that's the story. Let me just read it accurately so that I'm not accused of putting any twist on it. Oliver Anisfield is the sole director of the Bournemouth-based company Media and Activism, which owns Reasoned UK, a channel launched in May by outspoken young conservative activist Darren Grimes. That's the story. So basically, he owns this company. This company, they put on and hosted a production this week. David Starkey was a guest on this program, and he, in one of his remarks, which he has since apologized for, he referred to blacks as so many damn blacks. What was the reaction of Ollie Anisfield to this? So Mr. Anisfield said, as has been made clear, Reasoned, that's his company, stated they don't condone Dr. Starkey's comments. Obviously, a broadcaster cannot be held responsible for all words expressed by its guests. He said, I personally believe all human beings are created in God's image and have equal and infinite value. I believe there are legitimate ideas on both the moderate right and left, and the political work I'm involved in seeks to create a home for moderate conservative students who feel bullied by a far left culture which often targets Jews. I don't want to get into politics. What I do want to do is try to understand to what extent are we responsible for things that go on in our lives. Okay, that's the angle I want to take. And I want to take a springboard and come back to Oliver Anisfield and whether he should be held accountable for, when you have a production company, for what goes on your station, what people say, yes or no. And if you do have any comments, then feel free to put them down. It would be lovely to hear from all of you, and welcome to those that are listening. So let me share with you a basic Jewish concept, which you're all familiar with. You know, when it came, the idea is that the Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Lezeh, that we have a collective responsibility. There was this idea that, you know, in society, that it's about what society owes me rather than what I owe society. JFK and others have made statements. We're not going to go through it. But the key point is that we know that when it came to the building of the tabernacle, each of the Jewish people was commanded to give half a shekel. Why only half and not a whole? The idea was that by giving, they clearly indicated they felt and they had a sense of collective responsibility. Each of them had to make a contribution, and everyone's contributions were valued. Conversely, they were only commanded to give half a shekel, to recognize that you cannot be an island to yourself, that you are part and parcel of something bigger. So therefore, we have a collective responsibility as Jews for other people's actions. It's no good you coming along and saying to me, well, I disassociate myself with other Jews of different sects or different communities because they are not me. I am I and they are they. That is not our position. Our position is, our starting point is that we are all part of the family of Israel, and therefore we all have a collective responsibility. It's a question then of how far does our responsibility go? How far does our responsibilities lie? I'll give you an example. Imagine your kids. So when they're young, of course, if your kid does something wrong, right, you would feel responsible. What about when they get older? What about when they're adults? Are you still responsible? They are still under your watch. They are still your kids, but they may not be living at home. Many parents have said to me that once the kids leave home, they're on their own. It's up to them. They have to leave their own lives. I think that is true to a degree, but I think, and I'm looking at those that are commenting, that there are many that may disagree. In other words, yes, we allow our kids to have their freedom and we want them to lead their own lives. But at the end of the day, we have brought our kids up and we want them to reflect our values. And please God, we hope that they will be a credit and reflection of who we are. Right? They are our children. So therefore, with that in mind, we have a sense of responsibility for other Jewish people, right? And for what goes on. Now, we can't lead other people's lives. And this is the flip side of the coin. And therefore, on the one hand, yes, we have responsibility for every Jewish person, but I cannot control the actions of other people. And therefore, sadly, regrettably, be it during COVID, the way some people behave in not adhering to social distancing and other laws, and be it during society, normal life, where people are driving or acting irresponsibly or not keeping to other laws, right? We are responsible and we are not responsible. We have to try to ensure that we are a good influence on those around us, and we direct them and lead by example in the way that they should behave. However, they're grown-ups, right? I cannot control what they say. So my personal take on this story is, right, and we said we'd keep it in 15 minutes, is quite simply, and the simple answer is that if I do an event at the show, and this is the best analogy that I can think of, I would want to do research, due diligence on those that are speaking, those that are going to be, I'm going to be guest speakers, which I had last night. You research, it's an exhaustive process. You don't just put them on a pedestal, and you don't just give them a microphone, and you make sure that their views are aligned with your own, or that even if they differ, they would differ in a respectful fashion and not cause widespread offense. From the statements that Oliver Andersfield has made, it is quite clear to me that he did do that because he would he would never want to create offense and cause offense, and therefore, assuming that he did do the research, the due diligence, you cannot always know and control everything that a guest or somebody that you are with says or does. It's an impossibility. Sometimes our kids, people we're friendly with, they surprise us and they say things that, oh, I didn't know that. I'm surprised by what you just said. We have it all the time with our kids, with our spouses. People surprise us and they act out of character and they say things that we weren't aware of. So therefore, assuming that he did do the due diligence, which is my understanding, therefore, it is regrettable. He has to condemn that statement in the strongest possible terms. And having done so, I don't think he can be held responsible by the JC or by anyone for a statement that has been made by somebody on his show, which he was not aware of, if there was no offensive material or statements by this person beforehand. Every time I invite somebody on a panel or to come to the show, I am always very, very hesitant. I am always petrified. And I always research, not only online, but I approach the offices of the Chief Rabbi, United Synagogue, CST, and we do as much research as we possibly can. But however much you do, right, there is never an ironclad guarantee that we know everything that that person is going to think or say. We can only do our best. But the important thing is when things do go wrong, and when somebody says something highly offensive as this, then it's important for the organizer, the producer, the director, the owner of the company to come out and to condemn it in the strongest possible terms. So perhaps the lesson for us as Jews to learn is that we are responsible for the actions and the statements of other Jews, right? In other words, when a Jewish person does something wrong, right, it reflects on us. It's not us doing it, and sometimes we can be proud, or sometimes we can feel embarrassed by it. The important thing is, if we see something, or there is a story in the news, and it is an embarrassment and a shame on the Jewish people, don't stand idly by. The first lesson in Off the Record is make a statement, disassociate yourself. Condemn it in the strongest possible terms. And when we see a newsworthy story, which is good, which is great, then praise it. I'll end with this. There was in Germany, there was a lot of anti-Semitic rhetoric and newspapers that were full of anti-Semitism before the war. And there was an Orthodox Jew, and he made a point of buying the anti-Semitic newspaper. And when he was asked about it, he said it's quite simple. He was asked, why would you buy an anti-Semitic newspaper? They're speaking terribly about us. They're denigrating the Jewish people. They're blaming us for everything. So why would you buy it? He said it's quite simple. When I buy a Jewish newspaper, all I hear about is bad news. When everything is terrible, the Jewish people are terrible, we're a dismal failure, we're responsible for everything. When I buy a non-Jewish paper, an anti-Semitic newspaper, one of the things that they always make clear from the outset is that the Jews are highly successful. They're affluent, they're successful, they own everything, they're doing everything. I feel much better when I read what they believe of us there rather than what we believe of us. So we have to have honest reporting, and we have to make sure that when something comes out that we're not proud about, we condemn it. And when there's some good news, we hope and pray that all the Jewish media will make a point of reporting it and highlighting the good news, because that's what we need, in particular during COVID. Wishing everyone Shabbat Shalom, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow at Mishnah, or please God next week.